Hello, everyone, and welcome to another episode of Equity Leadership Now. Today, we're really excited to host Dr. Gina Ann Garcia, a professor at UC Berkeley School of Education who explores issues of equity and justice in higher education. As an organizational theorist, she seeks to understand how Hispanic serving institutions enact organizational identity for serving Latinx students and minoritized populations. Dr. Garcia examines experiences of administrators and faculty and staff also, and the outcomes and experiences of students of color attending these institutions. As a critical scholar, she is race-conscious and equity-minded in her approach. She's a product of California public schools. She graduated from California State University, Norridge, with a bachelor's degree in marketing, and then also from the University of Maryland, College Park with a master's degree in college student personnel, and UCLA with a PhD in higher education and organizational change. Dr. Garcia, welcome to Equity Leadership Now.
Thank you. Thank you for having me on the podcast. We've been talking about this a long time, so I'm glad we finally made it happen.
Fine. And we also have a co-host today, Myra Reyes. Myra, can you introduce yourself and then get us started with our first question for Dr. Garcia?
Hello, everyone. My name is Myra Reyes. I am an HSI graduate and currently an External Relations and Production Specialist for Equity Leadership Now and a Project Specialist for 21 CSLA, and I'm happy to be here. First question is, how has your personal and educational trajectory influenced your work exploring issues of equity and justice in higher ed?
Yes, thank you. So I always love the question about personal because I think, in academia, we have this term about research is me-search, right? And I don't think it's just about you exploring your own ideas, but a lot of us make sense of the things that happened to us, right? The things that we were involved with. And that is our lived experience in reality. So of course, that's actually good research, right? To draw on your own lived realities. So when I think about what drives me with a lot of this research that I do in higher education, HSIs, I am a graduate of Cal State University Northridge, longtime Hispanic serving institution. And when I was there, it was actually an emerging HSI at the time. But when I think about the experiences I had there, that's a lot of my thinking comes from that, right? It's like, well, what does it look like to have a transformative experience in higher education, right? As a student of color, as a Latina, when I went to college, I actually had a very different experience than a lot of students of color because of segregation patterns in the United States. They come from segregated, neighborhoods, either Black or Latino or both, right? And then they go to college, and it's not that, right? It's often more white than they're used to. And I actually grew up in a predominantly white city. I had parents that moved me to the suburbs and wanted us to have that, a different experience, right? So I grew up in a predominantly white space, and I always knew that when you're a person of color, when you're in a predominantly white space, they make sure they let you know. Everybody around you lets you know. So when I got to college, it was actually the opposite, that all of a sudden I was like, wow, like Latinos, right? It was transformative. And so I think a lot about that and how college can be transformative and what are the things that make it transformative for students.
Well, let's continue along that line, Dr. Garcia. What are some of the transformative efforts to continue this historical work toward diversity, equity, and inclusion in higher education?
So I think we're just in an interesting time, right? We have to just say that. Like, we're in 2026. Let's historicize it right now. And 2026 is challenging. It's becoming increasingly challenging even more every day when we think about equity and justice in the United States. It's becoming more elusive. A lot of the ways that we had historically seen equity movements towards equity and diversity and inclusion we're seeing them disappear, right? We're seeing them, a lot of backtracking, a lot of erasure of a lot of progress. And so I think there's that, is we have to acknowledge what is going on right now. That people who have historically been committed to equity, to justice, to creating educational spaces that are inclusive are still committed to that. That commitment is still there, but the ability is becoming harder. People are going underground almost, right? I was recently reading the book Fugitive Pedagogies, and that is informing a lot of what I'm thinking right now is like, are we going to have to go underground with this work? The environment has changed and then the ability to do the work has changed, but our commitment is still in our core, right? And that's why I think a lot about attacks on DEI is like, you can't attack what we at our core value, right? And I think that's something we do in our schools of ed, right? Like we teach our students how to be committed and how to do equity-minded work, and it's a part of them. It's a part of us, right? At all these different levels. It's just becoming harder to do it in the environment.
The question of going underground
Yeah.
clearly work toward making institutions Hispanic serving
Yeah.
is keeping things above ground.
Yes.
So you talked about Cal State Northridge
Right.
being a Hispanic institution becoming. So what is so important about gaining this classification in relationship to staying above ground with these kinds of issues?
Yeah. I mean, the becoming part is the fact that the diversity is here, right? Like, we are a very diverse nation. And when we think about us in California, we're a very diverse state. 56% of high school graduates are Latino identified at this point. So most colleges and universities are going to see that number of applicants because the Latino community is not applying. The applications are not at an equitable rate. Like, we still have some gaps there as far as access, but a good number are entering our system. So that's going to keep happening, right? Like that is what it is. We're at an enrollment cliff point in college and university enrollment, meaning that we are going to see in the next few years a decline in enrollment, everybody across the board, all colleges and universities, because of birth patterns in 2008. And so we're going to start to see a decline in kids in schools and people going to colleges and universities because of it's a demographic drive, right? But our Latino community is the one that is anticipated to continue to be the one enrolling. So we will see the above the ground. We're still a Hispanic servant institution, right? Regardless if the people in the campus, the university administrators are committed, we're still going to see the people, right? Which is where my argument comes in is this is who's in your institution. Are you going to serve them or not? Right. And we see that in K through 12 schools. We see that in colleges and universities. California, a lot of K through 12 schools are predominantly Latino students. Right.
Let me jump in right there again then, because you raised an interesting point. What is the difference between an organization being designated as a Hispanic serving institution and your concept of servingness in relationship to these processes that are going on inside of the institutions themselves?
Yes, I think there's a huge divide, right? Like, for Hispanic servant institutions, from the federal perspective, it is a 25% enrollment threshold. Whereas, let's say that designation doesn't exist in K through 12 schools, but a majority, like I said, in California, a good number of school districts, not just the school districts, as you know, are, I would say, Latino serving without having any sort of federal designation to be Latino serving, but they are. Right. And they've adapted and or are adapting to the population because they have no choice. That's the servingness, is when you make the intentional adaptation, when you start to provide bilingual services for parents, right? When you start to provide multilingual publications, right, that go out to students, right? And we see that, I think, more in K through 12 as a parent of a middle schooler and a high schooler. I see it a lot. We don't see it in colleges and universities. Universities are actually not adapting as quickly as the K through 12 schools are. And so that's the adapting to the students is what I would say is the servingness, right? Versus the number, right? So that intentional sort of effort to think about how the population needs something different, right? That's the equity piece. That's the servingness, right? That this population does need something different, right? Bilingual services does matter, right? Culturally relevant services do matter. And so that intentional adaptation would be the servingness work.
Mary, you want to continue the discussion with some considerations of how she's addressing some of these issues in her podcast?
Of course. In your podcast, Que Pasa HSIs, you discuss building a graduate-going culture from the college-going culture research. How do you see UC Berkeley becoming an HSI in the future and also building a graduate-going culture? Yes.
So UC Berkeley is on path to become an HSI by the federal terms, by the 25%. And just to be clear, as far as currently right now, the federal government has chosen not to fund Hispanic servant institutions anymore. So there is no more funding for this eligibility. But the eligibility process is still in place. And a lot of campuses are moving towards becoming Hispanic serving regardless of the percentage and regardless of the federal funding, right? UC Berkeley is one of those campuses. We've been thinking about what it means to be Hispanic serving, what it means to be Black serving, what it means to be Native serving, right? As we know, in California, Proposition 209, and even federally, with the most recent affirmative action case, Students for Fair Admission versus Harvard, that you can't do anything specifically in your admissions process to admit certain populations. So it's never been about that, but just thinking sort of holistically, right, about how we serve the people of California. Because like I said, 56% of high school graduates are Latino identified. So are we serving the people of California when our entering class is not 56% Latino? There's some debate. It's debatable, right? And what does that mean as our mission as the University of California to serve the people of California? And are we actually fulfilling that mission? But we are on path, and the entire University of California system, we have a UC-wide HSI advisory committee. And so we are continuing to move that, right? As far as the graduate going culture, that's an interesting one because, yes, that was a podcast episode about a year ago. And it's gained so much traction. Like, people actually use that word as if I had theoretically created this new idea. And I've looked in the research. There's no research about graduate going. There's a lot about college going culture, but not about graduate going culture. And so I had thrown that term out there, and people have been running with it. And I think that's something we can think about here at UC Berkeley, because we are the research, arm of the three campuses, right? We are the ones producing the most graduate students, right, out of all three public systems, that we should be thinking about how are we ensuring that our undergraduate students are going on and having those opportunities to learn about graduate school, learn about research if that's their path, and make sure that we're getting them ready to go into graduate school. But it's got to be intentional. In my class this semester, we had a week where we just talked about graduate going culture, and it really sparked a lot of interest in my students, right? Predominantly Latinos in this class, who had thought they wanted to go to grad school, but once we started talking about it, then it really sparked it in them that they did. I would say first generation undergraduate students are also first generation graduate students. So if they didn't know how to get to undergrad, how are they going to know how to get to grad, right? So we kind of stop, right? There's a lot of pathway programs to ensure that our particularly low income, first gen, students of color understand how to get into undergraduate, but then we don't necessarily have those continual pathways into grad schools. So how do we continue ensuring that our first generation college students who have nobody else necessarily to access for information get that information?
Yeah, I agree. I'm a first gen as well, and I think that we survive in undergrad, but we're more than ready to intentionally choose a graduate program. So to go on to the second question, you teach the course Latinx and Latinx in education here at UC Berkeley. What do you see inside the classroom, and what issues are your students discussing during these current tumultuous times?
Yeah. So the class hadn't been taught in a couple years when I was able to pick it up. So I was super excited to be able to teach the class, and really wanted to take it through two lenses, really, is centering students' identities, right? Making sure that we're centering Latino identity, but with that, it was intersectional identity, right? So we talked a lot about all the intersections, because obviously we're all, have a lot of intersections of identity. We're not just Latino, we're Latino and, right? And, right? Like by. So it was very intersectional identity conversation. And then the second piece was really making sure we're talking about bigger issues like systems of oppression and, discrimination, those kind of things that the Latino community deals with. And so the topics were vast. We talked about all, and within education, right? Within educational systems. One of the biggest topics I think that ended up coming up was bilingualism and the importance of bilingualism, right? Many of the students want to be teachers, right? They want to go out and be teachers in our K through 12 schools, and, getting them exposed to this idea of bilingualism in California was actually cut off for 16 years, right? We know that there was policy that banned bilingual education, and then it came back, and what that 16-year gap meant, and why we haven't caught up, and we don't have sufficient bilingual teachers because we haven't caught up from that time of the ban. So getting them really excited about they could potentially be the future of of educators here in California, which would be bilingual educator, right? So we talked a lot about language. We've talked a lot about immigration with a lot of the stuff going on right now with immigration raids, with ICE, on campus or near campus, or, even just feeling the threat of ICE in our communities. That came up, and what does that mean for students, right? Like, are schools even ready and equipped to care for 7, 8, 9, 10-year-olds who come to school terrified that they might go home and their parents might be gone, right? And that this is very real. And how do you, we've gotten through things like, how do you teach kids when they're hungry, right? Like poor kids, low income kids. We've come up with ways to address those kind of things, right? Like they can't teach them when they're hungry. Okay, like we can't teach them when they're this. We can't teach them when they're worried about their parents being disappeared. Right. And that's what's happening. And so, again, having a constant thing, how do we adapt to the needs of this current population? And this is a very real conversation happening in the Latino community. That's sort of also underground, back to the idea of underground, because it's something that families keep to themselves because you don't want to out yourself in any sort of way. So they keep it to themselves and hold in that trauma, and everybody in the family is dealing with that trauma. So these are the kind of issues that we were talking about, these very real things that are students are dealing with, and that the kids that they were going to be potentially going out to teach are dealing with.
So in the context of these traumatic issues that you just described, what gives you hope for the future of educational equity and inclusion, both in higher education and in education from zero to higher education?
Yeah. I love the hope question, because I think that I definitely have days when I'm feeling hopeless, right? Like I'm losing hope here. We are spiraling in a really bad direction.
It's different to be losing hope as opposed to being hopeless. So let's stay with the losing hope.
Losing hope. I'm not totally hopeless yet, but some days, it's a struggle. It's a struggle. I gotta, you can do this. We can do hard things, and the reality, and I think some of it is what gives me hope is the students, is the students that I get to work with is probably one of the biggest sources of hope. That they are still very, I don't want to say bright-eyed, right? But like ready for the fight, ready to change the world, right? And so having the extreme privilege to be at a place like UC Berkeley, where there are just phenomenal students, phenomenal people, phenomenal colleagues who are here to change the world, right? Like we all have our different desires to do really good things in the world. That gives me hope, right? So yeah, having to go teach that class every Monday at 5:00 at night. I taught an evening class. We would get through it, a 3-hour class every Monday, because I just knew when I went there was going to be filled with hope, right? That the students were still having a lot of hope about the future. And so, yeah, I think that's one of the things that gives me hope. I have kids, school-age kids, and they give me hope because they don't get caught up in all the things I get caught up in worrying about the country right now. They don't worry about the country right now. So I'm like, okay, they let me disconnect and let me be with them, right? And we just wrapped up our Stranger Things. I don't know if y'all are Stranger Things watchers, but we were watching Stranger Things as a family. We actually binged it in 2 months, in less than 2 months, all 5 seasons. That was great. Actually, I love a good binge, and that was a great show to binge as a family too. So we just sort of disconnect and enjoy that, right, as a family. So the little small things I think are what keep me going, but what keep me coming to work is the students, for sure, knowing that they need us, right, and they need us to be strong, and they need us to continue helping to fill them with joy and hope.
We know how tumultuous the entire country is. You don't have to go in this direction at all, but do you want to give any interpretation to why you're wearing a California Republic sweatshirt? Are you arguing for separation of?
I kind of have been making that argument for a while now. Yes, absolutely, yes. Yeah, we are at that point. That,
we don't have to go that way, but we can say that California is different from the other states.
We are different from the other states.
We talked about the 52% population of graduates.
Yeah.
We talk about the immense diversity. We talk about ways that we've dealt with immigration and bilingual and other kind of issues differently than many of the other states. So again, without going all the way to maybe a republic, we can at least push the idea that there's things that California is doing that can offer direction to
Yeah.
what's happening in the rest of the country and maybe even in the rest of the world.
Yeah, we're very innovative. We have great support, obviously, currently in our governor for pushing policies that are equity, grounded in equity and justice. I think that could turn. That's the losing hope, right? Like it could turn. We got a governor race, right? That is revving up right now. It could turn. We are not a blue state. Yeah. We are a purple state. When we think about governors, we go back and forth, right? And we've had Republican governors who've done horrible things, including things like defunding the University of California, Ronald Reagan, right? That funding never came back. Like he really, in many ways, destroyed the University of California and didn't believe in us because at that time there was such a movement for free speech, movement for ethnic studies, right? Like the really powerful movements that have gone on here, even on our own campus, UC Berkeley, were not definitely favored by politicians, right? And so I keep that in mind too, right? Is like we can't get too comfortable in our little cushy California place because we got to keep fighting too. We got to keep fighting for our policies that are going to make sure that we take care of our people.
Dr. Garcia, is there anything else you want to add as we move our conversation to a close for the day?
No, I think this has been really beautiful conversation. Thank you all for asking me about the work that I'm doing, particularly even about talking about my class. I think I find a lot of hope in that. As far as the research, the research continues. I am continuing to study HSIs and servingness, despite the fact that HSIs are now no longer funded. And a lot of the work I'm doing, even in my podcast, will plug Que Pasa HSIs. We're about to launch our season 7, and season 7 is focused on healing and joy, right? Like first we have to heal and we have to mourn the loss of support from the federal government. That's important, right? And it's interesting, the conversations we're having are actually, people are making them broader than just HSI funding, but just in general, the loss of support from the federal government. We know the federal government has been attacking colleges and universities. Attack the intellectuals is part of the playbook of fascism. So we are being attacked for sure, and the defunding is intentional.
Has that support affected you in a sense of your own mission to get the word out as often as possible? I know in one of the things I read about your biography, you have given more than 150 presentations around the state, around the country. Has that begun to siphon off as we've moved into this new area? And if so, what's your understanding of how all of that is impacting the larger considerations of what this work is trying to do?
Yeah, for sure. I mean, I definitely am, one of those at the college and university, a public intellectual. When people invite me to campus, they invite me to do keynote talks and public lectures to get the campus excited, right? About servingness, about what it means to be an HSI, what is our identity as an HSI, how do we serve Latino students? And I did a lot of that since, I would say, probably starting 2019, I started doing a ton of just all across the country. And this last year, it was winding down for sure. And this year, next year, we're going to see. 2026 is not going to be nearly. And it's for a lot of reasons. There's partially people the funding to even bring me to a campus, right? But also people are scared, right? Like they can't have, and I'm scared, right? Like the day that Charlie Kirk was murdered at a university campus, I was at a university campus giving a talk, right? I had people calling me, my own mother, concerned that like, you do this a lot, right? Like I had friends reaching out, like, are you okay? And I'm like, yes and no, right? Like, so it's frightening, right? We see, so someone like me who is vocal and names things like names like fascism, like we're in a state of fascism, right? Like that's dangerous. That's dangerous for people right now. And so it's definitely slowing down, which is unfortunate because I always say I sell ideas, right? I was like, even like I have books, right? And I'll be like, feel free to buy my book.
Your background is in marketing, so your marketing consciousness.
I am. Yeah, I do have a background in marketing, and it comes out. It's really interesting the way I market and package things. But I sell ideas, right? I market ideas, and that's it, right? Like you don't have to buy any book from me, but if you listen to the podcast, you've heard me speak publicly. It's a selling of ideas, right? It's just a different way of thinking. I think they're very hopeful idees, right? Like
ideas are powerful. Servingness, graduate going culture, all of those ideas.
Yeah.
They start somewhere, but they grow, from there. Mary, any closing thoughts on your part, or any final questions that you want to share based on the discussion we've had so far?
Yeah, I would say that having someone like you here at UC Berkeley and in California is really inspiring in terms of I am a first gen, but I do come from a mixed status family. So I think that a lot of the work comes from first gen. A lot of us figure it out. And I think that the energy that you bring and every time that I hear you speak, there's something there that keeps me going in these times. And I'm just looking forward to all the great things that you're involved in. And hopefully in the future, I'm able to also just have those ideas go into like more of an action oriented energy. So thank you for being here.
Yeah, thank you so much for saying that. I always appreciate the feedback, right? And knowing that my presence matters, right, to a lot of first gen, but also to Latina identified people, women of color often, very much connect with me and are like, I have never got to have this sort of presence in my life, particularly in academic spaces, right? We know that's part of the HSI work. Our faculty representation on an HSI doesn't reflect the student population, right? It's predominantly white. Our students are not interacting with faculty of color. School of Education, we're a little bit of an anomaly, right? But a lot of schools, and that's across the board, right? A lot of time your schools of ed are a little bit more diverse, but a lot of the interactions on campus, students aren't getting that still. We're just not seeing that. So thank you for that.
Dr. Professor Gina Ann Garcia, we want to thank you for joining us on Equity Leadership Now. Using our platform as one of the spaces to market your ideas. And, I'm sure that we're going to get a lot of response from our viewers and listeners. This is our first opportunity to do a podcast that's both audio and visual, and I can't think of a better person to do it with than you. Thank you.
Thank you. Appreciate y'all.